Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi. It's time for the rundown with me, Hugh Hewitt, on 400 affiliates across the world. If you're listening on townhalltv.com, good morning. If you're watching on Univision, good morning. Wherever you are, good morning. Going to be another rough day on Wall Street as Europe is deep into the red, with Germany down 1% and England almost down 1%. They tried to rally briefly at their open. They could not. I don't know where the market will be by the end of the day, but I suspect more bleeding is in store. The fact that the Wall Street Journal headline, global stocks stabilize after deep sell-off, is already old news. It was published at 4:14 this morning. It's already old news. That turned around. Gold has surged again, and the 10-year Treasury has fallen to, get this, 1.38%. If you have ever wanted to buy a home, call andrewandtodd.com today at 888-888-1172. They are with the Sierra Pacific Mortgage, but it's best to just go to their website, andrewandtodd.com, because the only people who are winning in this right now are people who want to buy property. The only people who are winning are people who want to refinance their house. Because as money pours into the United States, the 10-year Treasury is now inverted with a 3-month Treasury. The 10-year Treasury is paying 1.38%, and the 3-month Treasury is paying 1.5%. By the way, big recession signal. Light crude down to $51 a barrel this morning. It's a bloodbath on Wall Street. And why is that? Because we don't know what's going to happen. Absolutely uncertainty is what is driving this, and uncertainty will continue to drive it for as long as there remains no clear cure. A vaccine will not help. There's news of a vaccine. I'll explore that a little bit later in the show. There's news of a vaccine out there. A vaccine will not matter to markets because a vaccine will take too long to manufacture and distribute. You need a cure for the most chronic versions. Yesterday, I saw scientists estimate between 40 and 70% of the world's population will acquire coronavirus at some point. That is in keeping with the 1918 influenza epidemic, between 40 and 70%. However, many people won't even know they have it. It will feel like a common cold, but 2% of people will die if the most current estimates are true. And so I would just tell you that the thing to look for is not news of a vaccine, which is a great long-term solution, but news of an effective intervention that stops the progress of the worst 10 to 15% of the cases, which end in terrible illness or mortality. By the way, the Telegraph this morning in Great Britain, quote, ouch, the world's 500 richest people lost a combined $139 billion on Monday as markets tanked amid coronavirus fears. That's right. That's how bad the bloodbath was yesterday. And you know the numbers. It was down 1,000 points plus, and I don't need to review that with you. Let's go on with the rundown. Trump is having a wonderful time with Modi. The president and the prime minister are in India having a great time. Nevada's reputation as a Democrat caucus state is ruined as the results continue to be screwed up, but Bernie won going away, and Bernie's going to win in South Carolina, I think. Joe Biden is about to try and stage a late comeback, but then he got up on the stage. Honest to goodness, sometimes Joe Biden just amazes me. On a stage yesterday, cut number 13, Joe Biden says this.
And folks, one of the things I'm proudest of is getting past, getting moved, getting control of the Paris Climate Accord. I'm the guy that came back after meeting with Deng Xiaoping and making the case that I believe China would join if we put pressure on them. We got almost 200 nations to join.
Deng Xiaoping died 23 years ago. All right, Deng Xiaoping has never heard of global warming. Deng Xiaoping was a great, magnificent man with whom President Nixon treated, and of course, the second greatest leader in modern China's history. If we use the term great just in terms of significance, Mao was great, but he was an evil man. Deng Xiaoping was dead 23 years, but Joe Biden gets up and says this, cut number 13.
And folks, one of the things I'm proudest of is getting past, getting moved, getting control of the Paris Climate Accord. I'm the guy that came back after meeting with Deng Xiaoping and making the case that
all right, so you say
China
that's just another Joe flub. No, there's something wrong. There's just something wrong, and people know that. People who like Joe Biden a lot just know he should not have run. He is not up to this task. He is too old. Unlike Bernie Sanders, unlike Elizabeth Warren, unlike Donald Trump, he has lost the crucial step. There will be votes today in the United States Senate on the Paying Capable Unborn Child Protection Act and the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act. That will tell you who is pro-life and who is not. And then the key part of the rundown this morning is my new Washington Post column, which is a summation. It's on the front page of the Washington Post today at the landing page. Hundreds of comments, of course, agreeing with me. It's a summation of what I've been telling you in the rundown and on other segments of the Hugh Hewitt Show for 5 weeks. I quote, "Serial under response was the tragic story of U.S. and global reaction to the mislabeled Spanish flu of 1918. That pandemic claimed at least 675,000 lives in the United States and as many as 100 million around the world. The best guess is that the carnage of a century ago started in all places, rural Kansas, not Spain. What isn't a guess is that the vast and efficient killing machine that strain of influenza became. Its lethal effectiveness should spur all nations, certainly those where scientific authorities' pronouncements are not subject to government manipulation. The narrator says Iran and the People's Republic of China, for example, ought to prompt them to preemptive and thoughtful action." This column is really written for Donald Trump and his team. Fear of creating panic and harming national morale during World War I led President Woodrow Wilson and his vast machinery of government to withhold facts about the flu. That's in 1918, Steelers fans. What citizens saw with their own eyes, corpses stacked on porches, a run on coffins, sudden and calamitous deaths of young, healthy military men not at the front lines but in cantonments in the United States, destroyed confidence in the government. Wilson was not an authoritarian the way that President Trump is routinely and hysterically accused of being by the chattering class. Wilson was a real deal authoritarian, one who jailed enemies and who controlled the press as well as an economy to an extent not seen before or since in the United States. A cursory read of John Barry's The Great Influenza, which President George W. Bush was seen carrying when fears of a bird flu pandemic surfaced in 2005 as a means of alerting the public towards useful background reading. The Great Influenza sketches Wilson's iron lock on the economy, dissent, and the propaganda apparatus of a nation at war. Wilson demanded the country follow him into the carnage in Europe, and he observed secrecy at home about the disease. There's no worse strategy than secrecy for safeguarding the public from a pandemic. It is true that panic is a threat, but secrecy and innuendo fuel panic. Whispers and rumors lead to hoarding, irrational behavior, economic upheaval. Already, the U.S. government is behind the curve despite Trump's demands that it get and remain ahead of coronavirus worries. Bureaucracies are not nimble. Even as talented a leadership team is assembled by Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar and assisted by his trusted medical expert, his National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases Director Anthony Fauci, is likely to prove ineffective in the face of a pandemic's collision with social media. The Centers for Disease as the coronavirus in publishing confirmed information on where and how severely the virus, COVID-19, has struck across the globe. Trump could be assisted in this effort by the oldest trick in the Beltway book, a special commission. Led by Vice President Pence, the commission credentialing best information, knocking down fake news and fake cures as well as hysteria and overblown estimates of fatality rates are crucial end in themselves. A virus can't be killed with words, I conclude. I'm skipping a few paragraphs. Go read it at the Washington Post for yourself. A virus can't be killed with words, but panic can be steamrolled with information. Hopefully, the Trump administration won't settle for business as usual because this isn't a usual flu. Better to be accused of overreaction than convicted later of indifference. Donald Trump, do not get your own Hurricane Katrina. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I am Hugh Hewitt, and I can tell you what I feel. I feel you ought to go see Created Equal, this amazing new movie about Clarence Thomas, justicethomasmovie.com, justicethomasmovie.com. Get there, be inspired by it, tell people about it like our friend Michael Beckman is doing in Houston. Michael Beckman is single-handedly going to get the Astros a pardon, he and Mattress Mac. But I want to tell you, he's so sincere that when Michael Beckman tells you justicethomasmovie.com that he and his wife Sherilyn were moved, you know that it's that great. I'm not surprised because I've known the Justice for 30 years. Not well, he's not a good friend. I've just worked with him and known him for 30 years, and his robust, big laugh is a thing of inspiring, exemplary approach to living. So I do recommend it strongly. Bernie Sanders on CNN Town Hall last night attacking Pete Buttigieg, cut number 14.
Well, I mean, the difference between Pete and I have a lot of respect for Mayor Buttigieg. His ideology maybe is just shaped by the fact that he has raised a whole lot of money from, I think, 45 billionaires. And, you know, when you raise money from billionaires, you develop a certain point of view. We don't raise money from billionaires. We have raised received more individual campaign contributions from more Americans than any candidate in the history of this country. That's where we come from.
That's a preview of coming attractions tonight, as is this. Earlier today, Michael Bloomberg offered to lift 3 non-disclosure agreements. 3. Which raises the obvious question already seized on by Elizabeth Warren. How many are there? And are you giving consent on your side to the lifting of the restriction of every NDA from your point of view, leaving it up to the other party to decide which is appropriate? I think he's done. I think he's finished. I think Bernie's running away with this. I mean, Joe Biden again. I got to play this again. Cut number 13.
And folks, one of the things I'm proudest of is getting past, getting moved, getting control of the Paris Climate Accord. I'm the guy that came back after meeting with Deng Xiaoping.
All right, Deng Xiaoping had been dead for 20 plus years when the Paris Climate Accord was signed. Joe Biden also endearing himself to the South Carolina electorate and the Texas Super Tuesday electorate and the Virginia Super Tuesday electorate with this comment, cut number 12 in South Carolina yesterday.
I got assault weapons banned and major clips banned. Well, I just came from Las Vegas, the largest mass shooting in the history. Who in God's name needs 100 rounds and a bullet and a clip with a gun you have?
I am not a gun person, as Kurt Schlichter will tell you. I'm also not a poker player, as most of you know from yesterday. But I think I know that there aren't any 100-round clips. If they are, it's a very unwieldy gun. Mike Bloomberg is such a bad candidate. On MSNBC with Al Sharpton said this yesterday, cut number 9.
What is the argument you make that why Mike Bloomberg should be trusted by black Americans?
Did something to try to reduce crime, and we did cut the murder rate 50%, so we saved thousands of lives. It got out of control. I made a mistake. I've fixed the mistake. I've apologized for and asked for forgiveness, and I'm doing other things that will help the community. I can't go rewrite history, but I can continue the fight against get guns off the streets, get better education for people, have more economic opportunity. And the biggest thing I can do, I think, is replace Donald Trump and put in a president who has a feeling for people, because the president is the leader. And whether you like it or not, you follow, an awful lot of people follow whatever he or she does. So if he or she doesn't tell the truth, more people will lie. If he or she doesn't have a feeling for other people, different races, ethnicities, genders, orientation, whatever, people downstream will get that. That's why the person at the top is so important.
You know, I don't think that's going to win many black votes. Coronavirus update. 1,000 tourists at a holiday complex on the Canary Island of Tenerife are now placed under quarantine after an Italian tourist tests positive for coronavirus. This thing is moving so fast, and of course, the mullahs of Iran are not telling us the truth. They don't have any public health restrictions in place. They're lying. At least the authoritarian communists of China are locking down Wuhan, where they only have 500 new cases. And it's going to break out of Iran all through the Middle East, and the first confirmed case in Baghdad. God save the people of the Middle East without these advanced health systems, that 10 to 15% where the virus is deadly. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. It's a daily double. Mike Allen of Axios AM was on yesterday, and I asked him to come back today because we are having an incredibly important week of elections, and there will be a debate tonight. And Mike Allen's Axios AM this morning carries news of Harvey Weinstein's long-delayed justice. Weinstein convicted yesterday, facing up to 29 years in jail. And Mike Allen, it can't possibly be worse timing for Mayor Mike Bloomberg, who's got, I don't know how many NDAs. The collision of those two storylines is something no one can foresee in a campaign, right?
That's right. External events providing a frame. Harvey Weinstein's convictions, of course, story across the world, one of the stories of the year. It's only February, and we can say that with certainty. In Axios AM, the headline is Me Too Milestone, Harvey in Handcuffs. And Reuters had a great sketch artist rendering of Harvey in handcuffs. We also had a very nice sketch from the AP's court artist in Axios PM. It was a perfect sketch. It was Harvey's back. Harvey Weinstein being walked out of court with officers on either side going straight to Rikers.
You know, I think he's going to die in jail because I think he's going to get most of these 29 years. Even though he avoided conviction on the two most serious charges, I just don't think there's going to be any sympathy for him. We will see what sentencing brings. But the denial of bail prior to sentencing, that's clearly because he's a flight risk and people didn't think he would stick around. Let's go to the far more important story, Mike, in Axios AM, virus infodemic number 2. My Washington Post column today ends with this paragraph. A virus can't be killed with words, but panic can be steamrolled with information. Hopefully the Trump administration won't settle for business as usual because this isn't a usual flu. Better be accused of overreaction than convicted later of indifference. Do you believe Team Trump is doing enough, Mike Allen? Are they understood to be doing enough to combat the infodemic as well as the pandemic?
Two things, Hugh. One, insiders tell me that they wish the administration would be more visible about what's being done. Second, I know that you have Morning Joe on with no sound on, so I, on Pacific time, as you usually are, I'm in San Francisco today, getting my CNN early start out here. The lower third on CNN, Hugh, is Trump downplays fears of coronavirus spreading. He's not taking your advice.
You know, my advice is to name Vice President Pence the chair of a commission and put a bunch of worthies on it, governors, social media people, unions, Catholic charities, and just push out information. Basically, a Twitter feed that's weaponized to combat bad news and to be very upfront. If he makes Wilson's mistake, Woodrow Wilson's big mistake was to downplay the 1918 virus, and 675,000 Americans ended up dying. That was the equivalent of 2 to 3 million now. It will be his Katrina. In fact, I'm looking at your old employer, Politico, has this headline: Trump faces black swan threat to the economy and re-election. I believe that is true, and I believe it was unjust for President Bush to be blamed for Katrina. But if you don't act at the beginning, you never get a second chance with disasters, Mike Allen.
No, you're right, Hugh. And Axios, which focuses on topics shaping the future, we say 5 to 10 years, even beyond, we have a science team, and one of our experts is Eileen O'Reilly, who focused on epidemics and epidemiology long before the coronavirus was discovered. And she has the piece you mentioned about the virus infodemic. So infodemic is the misinformation, disinformation that's being spread on social media and which also can interfere with response efforts. Like Eileen points out in the story that's at the top of Axios.com right now, that bad information is undermining trust in governments, global health organizations, other nonprofits, scientists, and of course you're writing about this. These are the very institutions who need to organize the global response, who need people to listen to them.
I just finished. I'm listening to to Tom the new book Dominion, which is, by the way, you will love Dominion, Mike Allen, because it's absolutely Tom Holland's new book from BBC. It's about how Christianity shaped the West. But before that, I re-listened to John Barry's The Great Influenza. Every mistake that the world made in 1918 is being made again. Every single mistake, and especially when you get to bad information, fake cures, fake hope, fake numbers, fake outbreaks. Now it's on the fast track. Now it's at hyperspeed, and trolls are out there trying their best to destroy societal cohesion, driven by Russian trollbot factories and other bad actors. And Iran, of course, isn't telling us the truth. The most pressing need isn't for a vaccine, because 95% of the cases, 98% of the cases do not result in death from coronavirus. But if people do stupid things, it could get really bad. And I just don't, the president gets dug in. You know this. I know this. It's up to people like the vice president and the secretary of state and Robert O'Brien, the national security advisor, to get him, and Jared and Ivanka and others, to get him to move quicker, because he hates, I think he hates bad news.
That's right. He always wants to look better. And so the advice that one insider gave him was he should be out there saying, this is the best response, the most tremendous response, the biggest response ever. That's his wheelhouse. And of course, not just say it, make it real. But you're right about the hyper speed. And the Axios infodemic piece points out this is one of the first time that we've seen a epidemic, which, as you know, is on the doorstep of being a pandemic, based on statements that the World Health Organization made yesterday. And where does this come from? One, people want to inform their friends, family, but they don't always spread accurate information. Two, you have the twist here. There are online enemies that want to harm the China regime, who want to get Xi, and so that is another accelerant of fake information. And then this is fascinating. Experts are telling Axios that the long-term actors in the disinformation space, here you're talking Russia and others, are using this as a chance to undermine trust.
Yes, that's it. They will completely do that. And I look at the Iranian regime, which is the rogue regime of the world, along with North Korea. They're not doing anything. They're not publicizing anything. In Italy, they've got entire towns on lockdown, which is smart. And they've got the Canary Islands people all on lockdown now. There's a lot of stories out there. In Iran and Qum and other places, they're just saying, go about your business and get everyone infected, and we'll just see what happens. It's like a medieval response to the bubonic plague and miasma theory. Let's turn to tonight's debate. I think the first question should be, as I said to Mike Bloomberg, how many NDAs are there? Will anyone follow up? Do you believe Major Garrett or Margaret Brennan or anybody will follow up and ask Mike Bloomberg what he meant when he alleged Bernie Sanders believes in communism? To me, that was the great unasked question. Things move fast in a debate. I don't blame anyone at the NBC debate. They did a great job, in fact, in my view. It was the best debate I've seen in a couple of years. But when Mike Bloomberg accuses Bernie Sanders of communism, it begs for a follow-up. Do you think we'll get one from Major Garrett or Margaret Brennan or Norah O'Donnell or whoever is on the scene tonight?
Oh, well, I think we will now, because CBS News executives are listening to you, and I can guarantee you that none of those great journalists, and I've known each one of them for a long time, are going to miss that opportunity. And I think that they may get some help from the candidates. I think that the candidates may jump in as well. The last debate was, for sure, by far the spiciest, and tonight will be even more so because the stakes are high. I think you and I agree, 7 nights from now, a week from today, Super Tuesday night, California results come in. This could be over. Senator Bernie Sanders could have an insurmountable lead in delegates. And
I agree.
So,
I agree.
Tick-tock for all those candidates.
Last night,
that's a Tim Miller line from a great piece he did in the Bulwark. He did a good piece reminding people the lessons that the Republican establishment failed to learn in 2016. Look at Democrats, repeat some of them now.
It's an echo of 2016. Last night, before I turn out the light, I added to Twitter these comments, Mike Allen, for your response. It's not that establishment Democrats and Manhattan Beltway media elites aren't mostly united in their desire to take down Bernie Sanders. They are. They just can't agree on whom they should rally to. Tom Hanks, Captain Miller in Saving Private Ryan, was concussed and disoriented on the beach. His company crowded around him under fire. They were scared. They were shouting, "Where's the rally point? Where's the rally point?" And Hanks, Miller, responded, "Anywhere but here." Then he led. There's no one to lead except 44. By that I meant, of course, President Obama. And Obama's not going to do it. So with fervent support in his base, Sanders wins, possibly quickly. The Joe Biden, I got the Paris Accord passed with Deng Xiaoping isn't just another flub. Its timing is deadly. He can't just pretend this is normal. Bloomberg is a giant charisma suck, and for whatever reason, establishment Ds are jealous of Pete Buttigieg. So it's up the hill with Bernie or the bloodiest of political civil wars. What do you make of my assessment?
All that was one tweet?
Well, it was 4 tweets.
That was a tweet storm. You right?
It was. Well, I was just thinking, everybody hates Bernie, but there's no one to lead. There's no Tom Hanks on the beach.
Well, listen to this. Just maybe, his delegate count results the will of the Democratic primary electorate. Fancy that.
Well, that's I should account for that. I believe it's genuine. I don't think they care about Cuba. Again, the Beltway and Manhattan.
Those are dated. I think we're going to find that those attacks are dated.
I agree, and I'm by the way one of the people that care about that sort of stuff. But nobody cares about Fidel Castro, right?
You got to keep your national security attacks post 9/11.
You're right, Mike.
No, that's a serious. I'm not in any way making.
I agree.
I'm talking about to connect with the generation of voters.
I agree. It's all about Iraq. It's all about 9/11. It's all about China. It's got nothing to do with Fidel in 1961 and 1959. Mike Allen got to run. Thank you, my friend. Follow him at Mike Allen. Get Axios AM every morning, especially tomorrow morning for a debate recap. Don't forget Honor-Bound Coffee, Honor-Bound Coffee, HonorBoundCoffee.com. Every sip of coffee you take should be Honor-Bound Coffee because 100% of the profits from this coffee. The 4 great varieties, the 4 great brews, all go to support military families, initially through the Injured Marine Semper Fi Fund. And, I love the Injured Marine Semper Fi Fund, and I love Honor-Bound Coffee. Now, just leaning over to get my relieffactor.com. I've been listening to Tom Holland's Dominion. I went too far yesterday. A little bit sore this morning. So my 4 pills go down the hatch with my lukewarm coffee. I carry curcumin, resveratrol, and omega, and lukewarm coffee. It is the breakfast of champions. I don't eat before the show because it's just never a good idea to eat anything before you broadcast or give a speech. That's my free advice to speakers everywhere. Don't eat anything before you speak or broadcast. But you can take relieffactor.com. If you want to feel great for the rest of the day, you want to get out there and do 6 miles of trundling or however far you're going to go. Tom Holland and I are emailing each other this morning because I'm addicted to his new book, Dominion. Thank goodness for relieffactor.com. It allows me to go forward and go far alone. Listening to Tom Holland. ReliefFactor.com. $19.95 gets you a 3-week starter pack. Drucker is next. David M. Drucker of the Washington Soon. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined now by David M. Drucker. That music always means the forbidding David M. Drucker joins us. David, I have played a couple of times yesterday Joe Biden talking about how he did the Paris Climate Accord deal with Deng Xiaoping. That's not just another Joe blunder. I mean, he's really lost a step. Does everyone know that except Joe?
I don't think everybody thinks that. We'll see what happens in South Carolina, but I still think that there are enough voters looking for an alternative to Bernie Sanders that don't like the other alternatives out there, that he's been able to maintain some semblance of an opportunity. I mean, I think we saw that in Nevada. As much as Bernie Sanders ran circles around him, he still finished second. So a complete implosion would have sent that 20% of voters scattered to the other candidates. I mean, Amy Buttigieg, that was their opportunity to show that they could expand their position with non-white voters and build on momentum that they had achieved, supposedly, in the first two states. It didn't happen. So I think this is part of the fracture of the Democratic field here, and the fact that they're making up their mind slowly for Bernie Sanders, but they're not totally making up their mind, and that's one of the reasons why Biden still has a shot in South Carolina.
Well, the first question tonight, after Mike Bloomberg's announcement that he's releasing 3 NDAs, is how many NDAs are there, and will you release everyone else? Elizabeth Warren's already on that. The second question ought to be, again to Mike Bloomberg, what did you mean by Bernie being a communist? And then I expect everyone to pile on Bernie, although there's an argument for going after Joe to knock him out of the race to open up some lanes. But is that too late of a strategy, David Drucker?
I think that's too late of a strategy. And I also think that 2016 should have taught presidential candidates, and I use this advisedly, not to criticize you, but I made this sort of kitschy saying up after 2016, is that lanes are for losers. So you either are going to win or you're going to lose. And if you're not going after the guy at the top, knocking out the guy underneath because you're going to take his lane, and then from there you're going to find your way to victory and criticize the guy at the top later, it's too late. So the time to maybe play some of these games was, last fall, maybe, heading into the winter before the calendar turned to 2020. Now, and I think we've seen this from Buttigieg in the past few days, which at least recognizes where they're at. You're either going to supplant Bernie and tell his growing base of support in the Democratic Party that you should be the nominee, or you can, be self-satisfied that you took shots at Bloomberg or took shots at Biden. It's not going to win you anything because Bernie Sanders will keep winning primaries, amassing delegates, and this thing will be over.
All right, let's switch over to coronavirus. I've got a Washington Post column today over at the landing page about what Trump needs to do, and I think he needs to do a lot. Breaking news, Austria confirms its second coronavirus case. There are 1,000 people quarantined on the Canary Islands, and the news out of Iran, what little we can decipher from the mullah's propaganda, is not good. Donald Trump tweets everything is fine. I think the president is making an error of historic proportions here. What's your reporting on whether or not he's going to change course and elevate the response from Secretary Azar to my recommendation as the vice president, or somewhere where you can get more attention for what's happening and what people should know and not know?
Right. So I don't know what the president's next move is. I do know that, there are members of Congress, at least a couple of them, that have started to take this thing really seriously, and in fact did so weeks ago. Tom Cotton is one of them. I think you are right that the longer this thing goes on, the more it requires presidential leadership at the top in the West Wing, and some management at that level there. Otherwise, if this thing gets really out of control, it starts to become a political liability. But also, nobody can do what the United States can do. And so much is dependent on our ability to handle things around the world. And the longer this proliferates, the more dangerous it becomes to the United States, but just the more it's going to require some leadership, or you take a chance of people starting to ask questions. So I think, given where we're at, so far I thought the way the president has handled things has been fine. Everybody understands. I mean, even Democrats haven't blamed him for it, and they'll blame him for things, whether he deserves it or not.
Oh, you should read the comments at my Washington Post column. They are a foreshadowing of the left's response. He cut CDC funding. He fired a director. It's all idiocy. But they will try and hang coronavirus around his neck because that's just the way politics is done, David Drucker.
Right, but also voters, as you know, Hugh, in a crisis, real or perceived, voters these days, over the last 20 years, expect more direct action from a president than they used to, whether it's a natural disaster,
yes,
a major criminal event. And so I think it's incumbent upon the president not to ignore this or leave it to sort of minor deputies, if you will.
Absolutely agree. David M. Drucker, I will be looking for your analysis on tonight's debate tomorrow at the Washington Examiner, D.C. Examiner. David M. Drucker on Twitter. Don't go anywhere, America. Hour number 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show is straight ahead. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to the 400 affiliates across the globe. I am Hugh Hewitt, joined by the Washington Examiner's Byron York. Good morning, Byron.
Good morning, Hugh.
The president is speaking as we speak in India, having a press conference. The second question he was asked was, are the Russians interfering with our election? And I thought to myself, and I tweeted, Byron, the press is unhinged. That story has been discredited. The briefer went beyond the briefer's brief and speculated. CNN walked it back. What is wrong with the press corps? I mean, we've got coronavirus, China crisis. He's in India. We've got Bloomberg's NDA, Weinstein's conviction. You got 1,000 things to ask him, and they're asking him about Russia.
They're going back to what they know. The intelligence community is going back to what it knows. The Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee are going back to what they know, and the press is going back to what it knows. You're absolutely right. This was totally discredited. It started on February 13th. There was a briefing arranged by Chairman Adam Schiff, Chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and the impeachment leader has this briefing, and the Intel Committee talks about Russian efforts to interfere in the 2020 election, which everybody believes. Nobody thinks Russia is just not going to interfere at all. But then they take it one step further, and they say they're doing it in order to reelect President Trump. And that's when Republicans start asking questions. What can you show us some evidence? Why do you say this? Give us A, B, C, and D. Why do you say this? And they could not do it, and led to a lot of skepticism on the part of Republicans. And as Republicans are leaving, they say to themselves, boy, this seemed like it was designed to leak. And sure enough, it did, and here we are.
And I do believe that as the coronavirus sweeps the globe and infects people, the Russia virus just moves through the media. And its morbidity is a lot greater than 2%. It just takes over people and turns them into Putin question zombies, and that's all they can ask. Let's go to coronavirus. David Larder, a very good reporter, just tweeted out. So the coronavirus has a 2% death rate and doesn't look to be slowing down. You may think that at 2% death rate, your chances are good. Indeed, they are. But if everyone in the world gets it, that's 156 million deaths, which is 2 times the toll of World War II. Now, in fact, I read the WHO thinks only between 40 and 70% of the world will get coronavirus, and eventually we'll get a cure, and eventually the human immune system will respond, just like 1918. But it's still a very bleak prospect. Markets in Europe have turned red again. Who knows what the day will bring on Wall Street? Is the president doing enough? Right? He's putting out tweets, which are happy talk tweets. I think that's disastrous. What do you think, Byron York?
I think the happy talk tweets are a bad idea. I mean, this is back like the movie Jaws, where the mayor wants to assure everybody that there's no problem. The swimming is fine,
Yeah.
and so everybody should just get back in the ocean because there's no problem. So I agree with you that the president should stress what his administration is doing about coronavirus, but not at the same time say everything's cool, don't worry.
In line with that, if I had a producer, they'd play, you're going to need a bigger boat, because we're going to need a bigger boat with coronavirus. And I think that bigger boat is mostly in the information area and better. I love Alex Azar. I think he's a great Secretary of Health and Human Services. He's very smart. I think Dr. Fauci is a national hero, but I don't think they've got a high enough profile, Byron, to drive the information news cycle and drive bad news out and fake news out of the space occupied by coronavirus panic.
Well, what you're saying is they need somebody with a higher profile, and who might that be? Perhaps
the vice president.
Of the United States.
I think the vice president could lead the commission, and he could get himself a group of people around. I've written that for the Post today. But I think eventually the president will wake up to this. Let me turn your formidable powers to the debate tonight. Mike Bloomberg has released 3 NDAs. So that means the first question should be, what, Byron? My guess is, how many NDAs are there, Mr. Bloomberg?
Yes. Is this all of them? Why did you release 3 of them? Is this all of them? It's interesting in this debate, which, by the way, will have one additional participant, Tom Steyer, who has put a particular effort into South Carolina and is doing better in South Carolina than he is anywhere else in the country. So there was, I think, a legitimate feeling after this last debate among Democrats, which was, gosh, do you think we could have maybe focused a little more on President Trump as opposed to Bloomberg? So I'll be interested to see what they do as far as Bloomberg is concerned, because he remains the candidate with the unlimited bankroll who's trying to just kill them all with money.
Let me play for you a little Joe Biden from yesterday in South Carolina. I think this matters. David Drcuker, your colleague at the Examiner, doesn't so much. Cut number 13.
And folks, one of the things I'm proudest of is getting passed, getting moved, getting control of the Paris Climate Accord. I'm the guy that came back after meeting with Deng Xiaoping and making the case that I believe China...
All right, stop right there. Deng Xiaoping was dead for more than 2 decades when the Paris Climate Accords were signed. I know it's just another Joe Biden flub, but I put it to David, it's clearly not just another Joe Biden flub. He is different. He's lost a step, not like Elizabeth Warren, not like Bernie Sanders, not like Donald Trump. It's not inevitable, but Joe Biden has lost a step, Byron. Why won't people own that?
Well, I think they do own it privately. I mean, everybody owns it privately. It was kind of an amazing moment at the last debate when the moderator was just being, I think, much too hard on Amy Klobuchar for having forgotten the name of the Mexican president, where Biden basically jumped in and said, well, I've been forgetting the names of Mexican presidents for longer than anybody here has been alive.
Yeah.
So look, everything he does, every gaffe he makes, even though he was a gaffe machine in his prime, every gaffe he makes points to this idea that he has lost a step and that he lives in the past. He had a long, long career in the Senate, followed by 8 years as vice president. If you go to his event, he has surrogates with him like Chris Dodd and John Kerry, people who are also from the past of the United States Senate. And that's something that, amazingly enough, does not affect Bernie Sanders, who is the same age, actually a little older, who attracts just legions of really, really young voters. Now, we're starting to see some of that with Bernie as the media finally looks at what he was doing, his visits to the Soviet Union, to Havana, to Nicaragua, basically any place where there was some sort of anti-American dictator. Bernie liked to visit and say how great their educational programs were. But so far, Bernie has been able to attract this very young audience where Biden attracts older voters who nevertheless have some doubts about whether he has indeed lost that step.
Bernie attracted every demographic in Nevada. It will be interesting on Saturday to see what happens in South Carolina. But the buzz inside the Beltway, where I've been back this week, Byron, is that Joe Biden made up a story about being arrested trying to see Nelson Mandela. I missed it entirely, and that he had dodged a bullet because no one noticed it. Did anyone notice it? Did he make up a story about being arrested trying to see Nelson Mandela? That's just weird.
It appears that he did, and because he wrote a memoir, and he discussed his South African trip in the memoir and never mentioned it. What was interesting is I was on Fox News special coverage of the Nevada results on Saturday, and Brett Baer interviewed John Garamendi, the Democratic congressman.
And former Deputy Secretary of the Interior, a longtime player in California politics. Yep.
Who asked, and who's a supporter of Biden, and Brett asked him, well, what about this story? And Garamendi's response was, well, aren't we all storytellers? Haven't we all told a lot of I'm serious. You can look it up. Haven't we all told lots of stories? I mean, it was not a response that would that would gather a lot of confidence. At that time, the story was very new. I mean,
when I went and freed Solzhenitsyn, Byron, when I went and got Solzhenitsyn out of jail, I didn't brag about it. So I don't know why. Of course, we're all storytellers. I just think that we ought to be more modest in our stories that we tell. Byron York, follow him on Twitter at Byron York. Thank you, my friend. The Washington Examiner's finest. See him on Fox News as well. Come right back after the break. We'll see what's going on in the European markets. It's not good. Another long day ahead at Wall Street. Go to andrewandtodd.com, andrewandtodd.com. They will get you the best mortgage rate. And boy, if there's ever been a time to buy real estate, it's right now, because panic in the markets means great interest rates to buy real estate or refinance real estate with. andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172. I'll be right back.
Yeah. I did at one point. I do not have it now. A newer remote dial-in thing that can handle both cell towers and Wi-Fi and international stuff. If you remember how you said you wanted a remote gear in case you needed it in Virginia, it will absolutely work there. 3,600 of the 44 I need is this one device that I'm going to give to you afterwards after I show you how to use it. The rest of it is periphery that is available for this thing that gives me the best chance of success for broadcasting in Paris. And it's super portable and it's super easy to use. Yes. It's almost dummy proof. I have no idea. I've got the first part of it paused in my room where he did his opening remarks before questions. He addressed coronavirus. We're playing that first, and then we can cut live. He spends at least 2 minutes or so on this, so don't waste too much short seconds.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Time for a look at the markets, which it just was a bloodbath yesterday. 1,000-point drop on the Dow. Europe is in retreat this morning. European stock markets are down about 0.8% this morning. This report is brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian, the very best mortgage lenders in the world. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. I really do believe that. I think they walk people through soup to nuts. I had recommended them to, in fact, I recommended the dynamic duo of Gordon Wood, who's a realtor in Northern Virginia, and Andrew Del Rey to a young couple buying their first home. And that's always traumatic for young couples. And the team of Gordon and Andrew are just amazing. And you can get in touch with AndrewandTodd.com. That's the best way to do it. Answer a couple of questions. They'll come back to you with the best way to buy a house right now when interest rates are so low because of the coronavirus panic. Or you can call them at 888-888-1172. 888-888-1172. And the reason you want to refinance now and get money out of your house now, or the reason that you want to buy a second property or your first home ever, or become a non-occupying co-borrower, which means you sign on the dotted line with your son or daughter and or your grandson or granddaughter, is because I just have never seen interest rates this low, because I've never, ever seen it. The 10-year Treasury is down. I mean, the 10-year Treasury is the benchmark Treasury. It's not the rate you get on your loan. It's the rate on which all other rates are fixed, is at 1.38%. I'm always applauding when it's at 1.8%. Anything under 2 is great, but it's at 1.38%. And if they have another bloodbath today on the markets, and we won't know until the end of the day because news will come in throughout the day, and if it breaks out in Iran where they're reporting 15 deaths, or if it breaks out in Austria where they have a second case, or it breaks out in, this is the worst case scenario, in the slums of Africa or the slums of South America, where there is no health care infrastructure, markets are going to take again. If it doesn't, good. President might, in fact, the president spoke about it. We'll make this part of the market report for AndrewandTodd.com. Here's the president on coronavirus minutes ago.
I think it was
or maybe not.
Coronavirus, which is, very well under control in our country. We and the people that are, in all cases, I have not heard anything other. Maybe there's something new, because for 2 days I haven't been seeing too much of that news, of very much news, because it's been very all-encompassing. We've accomplished a lot here. We had a lot of meetings, as you know. But the people are getting better. They're all getting better. We brought in some Americans from a ship because it was really the right thing to do, and they're in quarantine. And we think they'll be in very good shape very, very soon. We discussed a lot of different elements. We actually discussed the coronavirus, and at this moment, India doesn't have much of a problem, they feel. It wasn't expressed that they did, which is great. And I think that whole situation will start working out. A lot of talent, a lot of brain power is being put behind it. $2.5 billion we're putting in. I see that Chuck Schumer criticized that he thought it should be more. And if I gave more, he'd say it should be less.
All right, stop. The president is basically saying all things are fine. Now, look, I don't believe that's true. This is one of those occasions where I speak my disagreement with the president openly. I do it often, whenever I disagree with him. By the way, Hosni Mubarak died. That's just a little breaking news. I have a column over at the Washington Post entitled, "Here are the steps Trump should take to counter coronavirus fears." Fears. I believe that fear is the enemy of rational decision making. We're talking to Brian Wesbury next hour about what to do in the market when fear stalks the markets. But the president needs to empower the vice president and other opinion leaders to knock down fake news about the coronavirus. That's the bottom line. You kill bad information with good information, the reverse of Gresham's law, and you do that. Go read it at WashingtonPost.com. It's on the front page. And then go to AndrewandTodd.com, 888-1172. Don't forget as well, Justice Thomas movie. Justice Thomas movie in theaters everywhere. If you need to be inspired in a day of bad news around the world, then go see JusticeThomasMovie.com. You will realize in the movie Created Equal that everyone can overcome, because if Clarence Thomas got out of where he was when he was impoverished, and I mean on hard knock row as a boy, then anyone can. JusticeThomasMovie.com. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Yep. Knew it. I know. Yeah, I know about that part. Got it. Got it.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, is speaking live in India. Let's go to that press conference.
A diplomacy of great friendship and respect, and I think it's going to all work out very well. I really do. I admire your country tremendously. I respect your Prime Minister tremendously, and I think it's really a diplomacy of friendship, and I think it's going to work out very well. Okay? Okay? Go ahead, please. Please. Go ahead, right next to Steve.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you know, the Chinese government recently ejected several Wall Street Journal reporters. What is your administration considering to do in retaliation to that move? Are you considering banning or restricting the access Chinese journalists, for example, have to the United States?
So I haven't really been given a full briefing on that. We're going to look at it. We will look at it. It's something that I don't like to see. I don't think it's fair because we give very good access. Maybe some people would say we give too good. I don't believe in that. I think we give very good access, so I don't think it's fair. But we'll have a decision made on that relatively soon. Okay? Thank you. Good question. Please, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Venezuela. So will you allow Indian companies to continue to buy Venezuelan oil from third parties, especially when you have sanctions?
Well, you'll be seeing something on that in the not-too-distant future. Yeah.
So there could be more stringent sanctions against Venezuela?
There could be very serious sanctions.
Or against the Indian companies continuing to buy
what's happening in Venezuela is so sad. People are starving. Here's a case where a country was wealthy 15 years ago and very wealthy 20 years ago. Very, very wealthy. The wealthiest in all of Latin, South America. The wealthiest, and by far, not even a contest. And when you look today, they don't have water, they don't have basic food, they have no medicine. It's incredible what's happened in Venezuela. No, we're watching Venezuela very closely. We don't like it. We don't like it. No. Okay? You're going to see in a little while. You're asking a question right in the middle of us doing something. Go ahead, please.
Ali McBall from BBC. There were some back home that were hoping you would raise concerns about some of these policies that Prime Minister Modi's introduced that discriminate against Muslims, and also about a rise in hate crimes here in India. But as someone
we did discuss that, and we discussed that, and specifically Muslims, and we also discussed Christians.
But someone
and I had a very powerful answer from the Prime Minister. We talked about religious liberty for a long period of time in front of a lot of people, and I had a very, very powerful answer. And as far as Muslims are concerned, as he told me, I guess they have 200 million Muslims in India, and a fairly short while ago they had 14 million. And he said that they're working very closely with the Muslim community.
But so you yourself have been criticized for policies that have discriminated against Muslims, like the travel ban. There's also been a rise in hate crimes over the last couple of years in the US. So are you in a position to talk to him about those subjects?
Yeah, I won the travel ban.
Stop for a second. Did you hear that? That wasn't really a question. He asked a question about what about India's policies. The president gave him a great answer, but he was really planning an attack on the president. That's what that was. BBC journalists. That's why Boris Johnson should just unfund the BBC. It's just propaganda of the left, for the left, by the left. It's not unlike NPR. NPR's got some bright spots like Steve Inskeep. But honestly, when the government funds media, it goes hard left. When the government funds media like the BBC and NPR, it goes hard left. More from the president.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
President.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Qin Yishan with Shanghai Media Group. I'd like to know, some people say that India could be to the U.S. in Asia during the 21st century what the UK was in Europe during the 20th century. How do you view it?
Well, I think that India is going to be a tremendous player over the next, it's now, right? But over the next period of 50 years and 100 years, look, you're talking about the largest population in the world. You're talking about a tremendous country in terms of its heritage, its potential wealth, frankly. Right now, they have incredible potential. Economically, they have great potential. Their schooling system is getting better all the time. They're doing a fantastic job with in certain sectors with respect to education. We see it in the United States. We see it. We have a lot of Indian students coming to our schools. They're great students, and they've done fantastically well at our schools. But we have, thousands and thousands of people coming from India coming to our colleges in particular, schools, but our colleges in particular. No, India's got a phenomenal future. I mean, you can rarely think of a place that has a better future than India, and highly respected, especially with leadership like Prime Minister. Right? Howdy. Yeah. Go ahead. Pick one. Go ahead.
Sir, Ritu from CNBC TV 18 India. American companies have been investing in India for a long, long time. Are you satisfied with the Indian investment regime, especially on issues like multi-brand retail and e-commerce, on which companies from US have a lot of interest in?
So I'm very satisfied because they're investing tremendous amounts of money. I met Mr. Patel a little while ago. He's the largest steel person in the world by far. I don't think there's even a contest. And he's going to be building $1 billion plant in Alabama. We had the press, I left him in there. Always a risky thing to do. But if you see let's say we answered 15 questions. They were talking about how much better it is to work in the United States now in terms of their investment. They have done a fantastic job. These are some of the biggest entrepreneurs in the world. I'm not even sure if the media really understood who they were. I knew many of them, certainly heard of all of them. The job they've done is incredible. But Mr. Patel, who's the biggest steel company, certainly the biggest steel individual, but I think he's the biggest steel company by a lot. He's investing billions of dollars in the United States, and he's only doing it because of what I've done to bring back the steel industry. The steel industry was dead, absolutely dead in the United States, and now it's a vibrant industry. It's incredible, and we need it. Again, we need it for defense. It's not just like certain industries that you don't need. We need it for defense. But he was glowing, and one of the reasons he's spending $1 billion in Alabama and more money in other places in the United States is because we brought it back. So we're very proud of that. So I think what we'll do is we're going to see some of you on the plane on the way back. It's been an honor to be here. It's an incredible place.
All right, he's wrapping up. I just think the president has had a great visit. It's an extraordinary relationship. It's an important ally against the People's Republic of China's interests in East Asia and, of course, the South China Sea. The Indian military working very closely with the United States military. It's great. It's a great visit. It's good news. Trump and Modi touting a big deal on helicopter. They have lots of deals that they've been doing on liquefied natural gas. I can't find out if the helicopter deal is with Lockheed and Sikorsky or what it's with, but it's a big deal. They've had a great thing. Now let's talk about tonight. The big showdown is tonight in South Carolina. And Bernie was on CNN last night for a town hall, and he attacked Pete Buttigieg because he wants the Buttigieg voters, cut number 14.
Well, I mean, the difference between Pete and I have a lot of respect for Mayor Buttigieg. His ideology maybe is just shaped by the fact that he has raised a whole lot of money from, I think, 45 billionaires. And, when you raise money from billionaires, you develop a certain point of view. We don't raise money from billionaires. We have raised received more individual campaign contributions from more Americans than any candidate in the history of this country. That's where we come from.
That is just amazing. And that's just a taste of what's going to happen tonight. By the way, yesterday, Pete Buttigieg attacked all religious institutions and their tax exemption and federal funding, cut number 20.
Mayor, just to be clear, do you believe that other religious and nonprofit institutions like colleges and homeless charities should lose their federal funding if they refuse to hire or serve LGBTQ people?
Yes, if they are discriminating, then they should not be doing it with federal dollars.
Okay.
Now, I have to tell you, that's a radical answer because the questioner included hiring along with serving. I know of no Christian organization that I endorse or push like the Salvation Army or Food for the Poor that does not serve everyone, including the LGBTQ community. Salvation Army takes care of everyone. Food for the Poor takes care of everyone. But I know a lot of organizations that do not hire people who will not commit to a covenant that says intimacy is reserved for one man and one woman who are married. And that is a long-standing tradition of religious liberty. And yesterday, the United States Supreme Court agreed to take up a case out of Philadelphia involving Catholic charities in Philadelphia and whether or not they have the right to control who they will sponsor for foster parents, because they don't want to sponsor, in accord with the Catholic Church teaching, foster parents who are of same-sex couples. Now, Philadelphia can certainly place children with same-sex couples. The Catholic Services does not want to do that because of theological objections. And those objections ought to be honored and respected in the tradition of this country's religious liberty. In fact, the Philadelphia case taken up yesterday, cert was granted, may presage the reversal of the Smith decision, which was Justice Scalia's only major error in his long and storied career on the Supreme Court, 1990 case, maybe 91, I can't remember offhand, Employment Division versus Smith, in which he said, look, we don't have to worry that much about free exercise. It was terrible. He reversed Vernon, he reversed a bunch of cases, and it's time to go back to the pre-Smith standard because of the increasing pressure of secular absolutism on religious liberty. And Pete Buttigieg yesterday just gave a radical answer. I think he hurt himself badly in South Carolina, where a lot of people, they don't care what his orientation is. They don't care what the guy or the gal down the street's orientation is, but they believe the religious believers ought to be protected in their religious identities and in their teachings of their faith from persecution, prosecution, and discrimination by the federal government. It's not happening. It's got to end. You know what also has to end is indifference to America's military families, which are carrying the burden of long deployments and injuries and wounds and stress and all that stuff. Military spouses are the most amazing people in the world. And one company, honorboundcoffee.com, is now established to devote 100% of their profits to military families. On my advice, they started with the Injured Marine Semper Fi Fund. And if you subscribe to Honor Bound Coffee, every sip of coffee you take will be supporting military family. 4 great different brews, 4 great tastes. And you just go to honorboundcoffee.com, make your choices, get a subscription, never drink another cup of coffee that doesn't serve military families. Honorboundcoffee.com. Also, time to remind you in this very wet beltway this morning, slow down on the beltway, slow down on the 395, slow down everywhere. And before you leave the house, get your relief factor because it's going to be terrible traffic. The rain always means that inside the beltway. And wherever you are on the East Coast, it's probably raining. ReliefFactor.com, Icarian, curcumin, omega, and resveratrol makes even the worst commute a little bit easier to handle. Provides support for the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains that accompany sitting in a car for hours and hours. Maybe you're just getting in your car early in Seattle, San Francisco, L.A., In the Inland Empire, you're headed in. You're listening to me early in the morning out there. It's 4:45 in the morning, and you're starting your commute. You want to be there by 7. ReliefFactor.com would make it easier. You'd feel better about yourself. All you have to do is call them up, or actually go to ReliefFactor.com. Subscribe $19.95. Get you started. Coming up, Senator Tom Cotton and I talk coronavirus. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt standing by for Senator Tom Cotton, who's doing a hit on Fox News as we speak. Everything got jumbled this morning because the President of the United States has been giving an extended press conference, which is now concluded. Let me bring you an update on the markets because that will be the story of the day. I don't know where they're going to end up. I think it's going to be another bad day, but it might rebound. I don't know. I'm not a prophet nor the son of the prophet, as Yoni likes to say when he calls in the show. But I'm reading from the Telegraph this morning. This report brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. Stock markets around the world have continued their downward spiral today. That's all I know. Oh, Senator Tom Cotton is with us. So we'll stop talking about AndrewandTodd.com and start talking about the coronavirus. Good morning, Senator.
Hey, Hugh. Good to be on with you. Sorry to be running a couple minutes late. The president's press conference upends everybody's schedule.
Yeah, it does, and that's okay. It was an interesting press conference. He again downplayed coronavirus fears. Senator Cotton, this is one of those areas with which I disagree with the president, as I have a Washington Post column this morning pointing out they ought to be going to manned battle stations on the information warfare front. Because people like Iran and China distort the information flow. What's your position on whether we're doing enough to publicize good news as opposed to fake news?
Well, Hugh, it's definitely true that the Chinese Communist Party and nations like Iran are lying about what's happening with coronavirus inside of their territories. China is more worried about censoring criticism than they are responding to criticism. The president is right in his press conference that all known coronavirus cases in the United States are currently quarantined. That's a good thing. What worries me is unknown cases. So, for instance, Hugh, in the month of January alone, 1,500 people flew directly from Wuhan to New York City before we stopped travel from China. That's why we need broader testing criteria, and we need to aggressively push out newly developed and approved testing kits to frontline health officials. Unfortunately, I don't think FDA and HHS are doing that quickly enough. That's the thing that can make a big difference in the short run, though.
When you talk about unknown cases, I had that experience. I actually did some reporting by going to the MGM National Harbor Casino on Saturday and losing money at poker, but just observing the crowds, and they were large, dense, and packed. Those will empty out the moment we start getting reports of the virus in the United States, Senator Cotton, and there are information warriors around the globe who will spread false reports. That's my biggest concern, is that fake news troll bots will try and divide America over this virus. Do you think the president has that high enough on his priority list?
Yeah, Hugh, I think the president is on top of the federal government's response to the virus. Every conversation I've had with the president in the last month has touched upon coronavirus and what we're doing. He's rightly concerned about the economic impact, and he's trying to mitigate that impact for America's families. He's also worried about the kind of disinformation that you can see on the internet, especially coming from China or from anthropologists or these international health bureaucrats who worry more about hurting people's feelings than they are about getting out truthful information, including information about what is unknown, and therefore what precautions we should be taking.
Do you believe the president's fully aware of the 1918 example and how devastating it was when the country did not get true information from the government, and as a result, Wilson lost the confidence of the people?
Yes, Hugh. I know the president is aware of past cases, not just recent ones like SARS and Ebola or Zika, but also those historical precedents, most notably the 1918 Spanish influenza.
And so what's he think about that? Does he really believe that Secretary Azar, who I admire a lot, and Dr. Fauci are good enough to elevate the American response? I want the vice president in charge of a special commission. I want a definitive, real-time response to every story, tracking, news, where is it, what's the virus in the United States like, whether or not there are vaccines, treatments, et cetera. We're not doing that. CDC, in fact, seems to be defining slow.
Well, unfortunately, there is some stubborn, kind of know-it-all, business-as-usual bureaucrats in the government who, again, seem to be more concerned about causing fear or stigma or hurting people's feelings, when in reality, the best thing to do in any outbreak like this is, one, err on the side of caution, and two, be honest with the people about what we don't know or what we know, and especially what we don't know, which gets back to erring on the side of caution.
In terms of, I've got a Washington Post column this morning that argues for a special commission. Have you talked with the president about raising the profile of whoever is his lead spokesperson on this?
I've not talked specifically with the president about that, Hugh, but I do think it's something that, as its consciousness is growing in the United States, in part because of the impact on markets yesterday, it wouldn't surprise me for them to take that kind of course of action.
And a last question. Do you believe the United States military was woefully unprepared in 1918? And it was in the United States military that the Spanish flu, which probably began in Kansas, took its greatest toll among young men because of the nature of the virus in 1918. Do you believe that the Pentagon is prepared for this in a way that you find satisfactory as a member of the Armed Services Committee?
Yes, I am confident that our military leaders are doing everything they can to be prepared.
Senator Tom Cotton, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere, America. Hour number 3 of the Hugh Hewitt Show straight ahead. We continue to follow the markets. I continue to advise you to go to andrewandtodd.com because when the interest rates are down at 1.38% for the 10-year bond, you can borrow to buy a home at rates you've never seen before. So there is good news even among market mayhem. Brian Wesbury joins us next hour, as does Marc Lotter, Director of Communications for Trump 2020. Stay tuned. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to all my 400 affiliates around the country and the globe. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside a very wet beltway this morning, joined at the beginning of the hour number 3 by Marc Lotter, Director of Trump 2020 Strategic Communications. Always a pleasure, Mark. Thanks for joining me on this wet day inside the beltway. I'm sure you've been at work for hours already.
I am down actually in Charleston, South Carolina, where it's wet as well.
Are you going to be doing the spin room tonight? Is that why you're there?
Well, they don't let me actually in the spin room. The Democratic committee doesn't allow us inside, but we'll do our best to make sure we're heard here in local and national media from right here on the debate site.
Now, Mark, the obvious first question. Mike Bloomberg releases 3 NDAs. So the obvious first question is, how many NDAs are there? Do you think it will get asked?
I think it likely will. I think Elizabeth Warren was asking at the debate stage in Las Vegas last week how many there were, and Mike Bloomberg didn't really have a good answer. I would hope that if he did anything from learning from Nevada was that he should have fired his debate prep team because they were absolutely horrible. And despite the fact he has billions of dollars, he clearly didn't have enough money to buy a clue.
You should also see his social media, that Team Mike. If that's the best social media you can buy, then it's not for sale. It's horrible. And I just wonder about whether or not Bloomberg's been out of the game too long. Joe Biden's been in the game too long, but I think Bloomberg's been out of it too long, Marc Lotter. Do you think his campaign is slow on the uptake?
I think they really are. I think he's campaigning from a style, from 10 plus years ago, and it moves a lot quicker right now. And if you can't even handle the JV team on the Democrat side, wait till you step into the ring with our campaign and Donald Trump.
Let me play for you Joe Biden yesterday in South Carolina, because this is sensitive, but I want to ask you about it. Cut number 13, the former vice president reminiscing yesterday.
And folks, one of the things I'm proudest of is getting passed, getting moved, getting control of the Paris Climate Accord. I'm the guy that came back after meeting with Deng Xiaoping.
Now, Mark, Deng Xiaoping was dead 20 years more than 20 years when the Paris Climate Accords were negotiated. That follows hard on Joe telling us he got arrested trying to free or visit Nelson Mandela. This is not normal, even for Joe, for whom gaffes are a daily cup of coffee. This is not normal stuff. Do you agree?
No, I agree. In fact, it was even made worse, I believe, last night. At least I saw it last night when he closed out a rally asking South Carolina Democrats to vote for him for the United States Senate. He was running as a Democrat nominee for the United States Senate, and it's really getting embarrassing. And it's something that I think the Democrats are going to have to take a look at as they go to the polls here on Saturday in South Carolina.
Now, I have already cast my ballot in Northern Virginia because I will not be here on 3-3. I voted for Bernie Sanders because it was an open primary. I hate open primaries, but as long as they're the law of the land, I'm exercising my franchise, not because Bernie's the weakest candidate. I don't think he is. I think that's Elizabeth Warren and probably Joe Biden, but because it's the clearest, starkest choice. I know the rote answer is the president doesn't care who he runs against, but wouldn't you like to run against Bernie Sanders, Marc Lotter?
Well, and it's true. The answer is we don't care. But I also have done this long enough that I don't usually try to wish for my opponent, because sometimes you might get what you wished for and not expected it. Because every Democrat consultant would have told you in 2016 you want to run against Donald Trump, and that didn't really work out very well for them. So I'll let them pick their candidate. We're prepared for any of them. But you're right. Having a self-proclaimed socialist leading your ticket, he's already been leading their policy shop for years because they're only debating his policy ideas right now and that of the squad. You got to wonder, is this where they really want to go?
Yeah, I repeat, I don't think it will be the easiest candidate. That would be Elizabeth Warren, because Michigan will not vote for Elizabeth Warren, period. But Bernie brings a stark choice before the American people, a choice we have to make, whether we're going to go down the road of socialism or whether we're going to stay with free market. It's a choice we have to make. He clarifies it, and that's why I want it. Let me turn to Inside Baseball. I'm looking at the official Donald J. Trump website, donaldjtrump.com. The first thing that comes up is 35, 50, 100, 250, 500, 1,000, 2,800, other. Make this a monthly recurring donation. They better not do that for 2,800. That's not legal. But how is the fundraising with the small donors, Marc Lotter?
unbelievable, off the charts. We've seen a 20 to 30% increase in small dollar donors since Nancy Pelosi announced her impeachment inquiry. Just last month in January, between ourselves, the Republican National Committee, and our related committees, raised a record $60.5 million. $200 million cash on hand, over $500 million raised already. And but the key is, and this is very important, I mean, President Trump got outspent in 2016. Obviously, Bloomberg can burn billions. But if you don't have the right message, it doesn't really matter how much money you have. So not only do we have a huge cash advantage right now, it's how we're spending it, putting money in the targeted states. I hear it from state chairmen all over the place. They've never seen this kind of support financially and with staff from a presidential campaign this early in the cycle, and that's where it's really going to come back and benefit the president in November.
Now, explain to me why $35 matters to Donald Trump and to his campaign. I mean, if they go to Donald J. Trump, that's your initial ask is for $35. Why does that matter?
Well, because what we have seen in our data, and of course we have a tremendous data analytics team, is that if you're willing to make a small contribution, you're much more likely to vote on November 3rd for the president. So, there's a number of factors we take into it. If you attend a rally, you're like 98% likely to vote for the president. If you donate $1 or, $35, you become 99% likely. And in some of these close states and in a close election, that kind of energy matters. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that we're capturing not just the big dollars, but the little folks. I mean, we've raised over $1 million selling plastic straws.
Well, please send me some because I hate paper straws so much. I think you can win the election on the paper straw issue. But Marc Lotter, stay with me on that. I've never worked inside of a campaign. I've only volunteered for campaigns. And now when I went in the news business, I've not. So I don't know the correlation. I thought there was a correlation between small donor and voting. Is there also a correlation between small donor and volunteering?
Yes, absolutely. And it's a very high percentage. And it's also very high for the folks who go to our rallies. And we like to joke inside the campaign that if you're willing to camp out for days in bad weather, or even just take the day off of work, stand in line for hours in potentially bad weather to see the president, when we come back to you in September and October, we ask you to make 10 phone calls to your friends or just get out to vote. You're likely to do it if you're willing to do all that other stuff on the front end.
All right, so Inside Baseball, last time you were on, you talked about making Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Nevada states in which the Republicans were competitive. And I've always said it's a three-state election, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. You added those three. Are you still pouring resources and people into those three? Are you trying to extend the map anywhere else?
Absolutely. We're also making a serious play in New Mexico, in Colorado. We've even sent Brad Parscale, our campaign manager, Laura Trump, to Oregon. And I think when you have Bernie Sanders as the leader of the Democrat primary process right now, every state in the union is in play, with the exception of maybe being the People's Republic of California.
And Vermont. I mean, Vermont is lost to coherence. And so Oregon, I am a little bit surprised by that because Oregon has been lost to the normalcy of American politics for a long time. What is going on in Oregon? Tell me about that.
Well, we're seeing it when you get outside. When you get outside of the major cities, when you get outside of Portland, there is a huge MAGA component there, a very large swath of people who support the president. And then when you start to get closer in, when we can make that case about the growing economy, about paychecks going up, and really just highlighting the failures of liberal leadership in those states, in those cities, we're starting to see more and more people are being open to having that conversation. And until the data shows us otherwise, it's a conversation we're going to continue to have.
Let me close with coronavirus because I think the president has stumbled here. And I have a column about this on the landing page at the Washington Post. I do not believe we can leave this to even the very competent Alex Azar and Dr. Fauci. I think you need to elevate this. What do you hear about the president's response to coronavirus? Is he going to up the game here?
I think we're seeing that. We saw the budget request go to Congress for $2.5 billion to help deal with it. What we see going on the backside, the stuff that you don't see in the news every day, is America is still the leader in terms of technology, in terms of innovation. So our laboratories right now, whether they are private sector or in partnership with the CDC, are working hard at not only being able to identify and diagnose the virus, but also working on a vaccine and treatment for it. That's in the works, and it's going along well.
I hope you will go read my column, Mark, because I think you need to do more in terms of comms, but you're the expert on that. I'm just a talking head. Marc Lotter, Director of Strategic Communications for Trump 2020. Follow him at Marc, M-A-R-C _Lotter, L-O-T-T-E-R, Marc _Lotter on Twitter, and then you'll be as smart as everyone who follows him. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt inside a rainy beltway this morning, bringing you news from the nation's capital to the 400 affiliates. It's like broadcasting from Rome in AD 315. I mean, it's when Constantine took over. It's just sort of, it's a great place to broadcast from. All the news is at your fingerprint. The news was not good on Wall Street yesterday. This morning market report, the business story of the day, brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. 888-1172. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, and you ought to call them today. I mean, today. 888-1172. Whether you are in Oregon, I was talking about Marc Lotter, or in Florida, whether you're up in Maine or down in San Diego, they will handle your mortgage. They are lenders. 888-1172. They will lend you the money. They will not give you a bad loan. They will give you a great loan, and they will give you great advice. I sent them a young married couple in the Beltway just this week. They are working with Gordon Wood, a great realtor in Northern Virginia, and with Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian, and they will get, hopefully, a house today. And they've been working with them. I've been following it from afar, and Andrew and Todd just work for their people, and they've got a great team. Call them, 888-1172, because the 10-year Treasury right now is at 1.38%. I got to ask Brian Wesbury when did he last see the 10-year Treasury at 1.38%? That reflects through the entire housing market in lower interest rates for your 15-year and your 30-year fixed rates, and it just makes for remarkable refinancing. Don't miss this opportunity. Sadly, Europe is not in the green. Europe is not over the coronavirus scare. The English have come back a little bit. They're down 0.61% this morning. Germany is also down about a third of a percent. Not a bloodbath like yesterday. There was a bloodbath in Asia. I don't know what's going to happen by the close of the market today. A lot depends on what the news is. If, in fact, in the middle of the day, you get a cluster virus outbreak somewhere in the States, markets will plunge. If it doesn't happen, every day that we get closer to an antiviral that works is a day we're better off. Because that's what we'll come up with. The United States will come up with the cure. And eventually we'll get a vaccine. Vaccines will not be effective for 18 to 24 months. It takes that long to produce them and distribute them and produce the effective immunization you need in the body politic. But a cure, or at least an ameliorative treatment, an antiviral sufficient to deal with COVID-19, will arrive from an American laboratory or somewhere else in the world. Godspeed all scientists. Don't want this to happen, and we're seeing in real time what happens. But right now, the only good news is if you've been wanting to buy a piece of investment property, you've been wanting to consolidate debt and get money out of your house, now is the time. AndrewandTodd.com. Can I go back? We did not have, Marc Lotter just told us that last night Joe Biden closed his rally by asking them to send him to the Senate from South Carolina. I got to go back and play Joe Biden talking about Deng Xiaoping and the Paris Accord, cut number 13.
And folks, one of the things I'm proudest of is getting passed, getting moved, getting control of the Paris Climate Accord. I'm the guy that came back after meeting with Deng Xiaoping and making the case that I believe...
No, actually, he did not meet with Deng Xiaoping about the Paris Climate Accord. He didn't. Deng Xiaoping had been dead for 20 years. Now, Joe Biden fans and friends and family think this is unfair. I don't. I have got no age discrimination. I think Trump is fine. I think Sanders is fine. I think Elizabeth Warren is fine. I don't care how old you are if you haven't lost a step. But there's a reason why people retire from the NBA at different ages. All right, there's a reason why Tom Brady can play, 100? He's been driving me crazy forever. I don't know how old Tom Brady is. Is he as old as I am? Is he as old as Carl? So there's some reasons why some people can play QB and other people like Andrew Luck quit. Joe Biden should quit. He's lost a step, and everybody knows it, and he's going to get crushed in this campaign, and better to leave when you're leaving is your choice than when you're booted out. I think Bernie's going to win South Carolina. I think Republicans are going to vote for Bernie in overwhelming numbers because they want the clarity of choice, not the easiest opponent. He isn't the easy opponent. That's Elizabeth Warren. But Bernie presents the choice America must make. And I'll talk about that with Brian Wesbury after the break. Don't go anywhere. It's the Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside a drizzly, wet beltway, joined by Brian Wesbury, who I assume is in Chicago. Of course, Brian is an American economist, beloved of this audience in the afternoons. He never gets up this early. Chicago people sleep until noon. But he's back. He decided to get out of bed because market panics are interesting. Hello, Brian. Welcome back.
Hugh, it is great to be back with you. Great to be with you.
Now tell me, you must be in demand today like you are whenever there are crazy markets. What do you think generally of what happened yesterday and what is ahead this week?
Yeah, well, I look at yesterday as more of a panic. Now, what's interesting is we had not responded. The markets, in fact, it continued to go up during all of this. And then I'm just reporting news that everybody knows already. But once we saw Italy, Iran, South Korea start reporting more cases, then all of a sudden everybody said, "Oh no, it's not as contained as we thought," and so we just got it all in one day. I continue to believe that this, and I'm not a pandemic expert. I'm not trying to be an immunologist, and I'm not just trying to cherry pick data. But if you really go inside the data, one of the pieces of news that I look at is active cases. So we know how many reported cases of coronavirus we have. What a lot of people don't follow is, yes, there are deaths. That's awful. It's terrible. I'm not making light of any of that. But there's also recovered cases. And so if you look at the total number of active cases that are out there today, it peaked at 58,700 back on February 17th, and it's now down to less than 50,000. So that number has turned the corner, and my belief is that, like most of these things we've seen in the kind of modern era, it will continue to turn the corner. That we've gotten to the worst part, even though there's the potential. There's always the potential that my optimism about these numbers, or the fact that the World Health Organization isn't willing to say it's a true pandemic yet, that those thoughts are wrong, and so that's what the market was trying to price in. How much is it going to affect global growth, and are we wrong that it's going to burn out like socks?
When you sit there and you talk to your First Trust portfolio clients, they want to know what is the situation. And this is where I think the market has trouble, is that we have totalitarian regimes like China and Iran, which will not level with us. And and that makes it impossible to accurately predict scope, scale, consequences for the supply chain, for the economic sideline, much less the human suffering. How does the market deal when you have regimes like, especially Iran? China's been relatively open. We know they have 80,277 cases, according to the South China Morning Post, 2,700 deaths, 27,471 recovered. That goes to your net that you're talking about. But they're relatively transparent. Iran is just lying. So what does the market do with that?
Yeah, I totally agree about Iran, but I guess the good news with Iran is that everybody shut their borders, and in fact, those borders were. I mean, I get it in the mountains. It's really hard to shut things down, but people aren't flying in and out of Iran anymore, and if they're lying, they're going to pay a huge consequence for this in lives for their own citizens. You know what I find, these regimes, Iran and China today, are under fire. President Trump has put both of them under pressure. China with tariffs, Iran with a military response, and if they continue with social media out there today, with so much news out there today, these totalitarian regimes are being watched like never before. And, this isn't 1918. It's not, you can't get away without having someone leak news. And so what I find fascinating is that this is going to put pressure on them to open up. And when I think longer term, that's a positive for the world, that if you do lie, you are stained in the global view of you more than you have ever been. And so that's one great thing. I mean, social media, if we had reported every single day the number of people that had gotten influenza A and just the flu, we had 15 million cases in the United States this year. We had 140,000 of those people got hospitalized, and 8,200 people died. So imagine if the market and all the players and all the investors of the world were looking at those cases every single hour, every single day, waiting for the updates. It's massively larger than the coronavirus, and I think that's one thing we have to do is put this in perspective. And the flu is pretty dangerous, and it's much more virulent than the coronavirus has been so far. You know, I get it; it's a new virus, but the fact of the matter is, when you compare it to just the flu, it's small right now. And
so mortality of the flu is 0.07%. Mortality for
Correct.
coronavirus at this early stage is 2%. What worries me the most, Brian Wesbury, is the 1918 epidemic, not the press clampdown. That's not going to happen, but the fact that it mutated a dozen times between its spring arrival and its fall killing. That means it goes through passages and it becomes more virulent before it begins to weaken. In other words, we may be on the beginning of the beginning, not the end of the end. And how does the market price that in?
Yeah, and what I'm going to tell you is I don't think it can. And so when we look at the impact on the market directly, it's like Hugh, and I don't know if any of us can. We know the stats outside of China. The death percentage is way less than 2%. It's like 1% or even a little less so far. And what that tells me, by the way, just talking about totalitarian regimes, is that China, in many places, does not have a great healthcare system, not compared to the West, and that's one of the reasons that their death toll is higher. But having said that, we know factories are shut down. One of the pieces of good news is that companies were already moving their supply chains out of China due to the Trump tariffs, and that's going to blunt the impact somewhat. But we know, I mean, when we get the phone calls and the reports from Starbucks, from Apple, from companies that produce in China and sell into China, it's going to have an impact on their earnings. We know Chinese GDP, with this many shutdowns of factories, is going to be hit hard in the first and second quarter. But at least so far, from a macroeconomic point of view, all right, forget the reports from companies that have sales in China and production in China. But right now, we don't see a spike in layoffs in the U.S. We haven't seen a big drop in economic data in the U.S. So I'm not going to tell you that there's no economic impact here, but I think it's going to be smaller unless this thing becomes a Spanish flu type of pandemic, which the way I look at that, Hugh, is it's not 1918 anymore. I mean, we have already, it's going to be 3 months from the first day we learned about this virus and got its genome to when a company in the U.S. is going to have stage 1 tests for a drug to combat it. And that's a record. You know, with SARS, it was 20 months. And so that's the difference, I think, between 1918 and today, is that I guess we could come up with that it mutates and that this new drug isn't going to be the right one in 2 months. But the bottom line is these immunologists are so smart. The tools they have are so unbelievably powerful that they're able to rush something to the market in 3 months instead of 20 months. And it's been less than 15 years since.
Last question.
Yep.
Last question, Brian. Yesterday, the sage of Omaha came out and said, "Look, it's scary, but I'm not selling my stocks." What's your advice to investors? Are you a Buffett fan here? Do you agree with him?
Yep, same thing. That's exactly what I was telling everybody yesterday too. Don't panic. And we have. There's always the chance that something explodes, that we do get a Spanish flu again. But I mean, I learned about, and so did you, I'm sure, in high school history class. You learned about Spanish flu. And, for me, that was 35 years ago. And how many times have we heard it's coming back, and it hasn't? And that doesn't mean that it couldn't. But I just think there's something different about the healthcare systems of the world today, especially the last decade with the genome sequencing that we can now do and the testing on computers that we can now do. That I just think the world isn't not in totalitarian regimes, but in the freer, more capitalist world, we're more prepared for something like this. And as a result, I'm even more. I mean, if you would have stayed invested during the Spanish flu, you would have been fine. If you would have stayed invested during SARS, you would have been fine. And so why should I treat this any different? I'm just not willing to do that yet. I think you could pay a huge price by not being in the market when it rebounds.
Brian Wesbury, always good to talk to you. Say hello to Frank, my friend, for me and everyone at First Trust. Keep getting up early. I know you Chicago people hate it, but I appreciate it very, very much. Follow him on Twitter at Wesbury. I've forgiven him for the 2016 Cubs win over the Indians, so he's back. He's back in our good graces again. Thank you, Brian. Time for me to tell you not about the market. I am not a prophet nor the son of the prophet, but I do know that if you drink coffee like I do every morning, I'm showing off my pot of coffee that I bring in from the studio, and I'm having my honorboundcoffee.com moment where I tell you if you drink coffee like I do, which is daily, you ought to be using one of the 4 blends and one of the 4 grinds that is done by Honor Bound Coffee because it's the best coffee in America. And 100% of the profits from every drop of coffee you drink will go to support military families. They're starting with the Injured Marine Semper Fi Fund. Pete and Seth Talbot, the same people who bring you ReliefFactor.com, got together and they said, we got to do something for military families. There is a coffee company. They bought it, improved it, made it great coffee, but they're just taking the marketing like they always do through the ceiling. HonorboundCoffee.com. What a great idea. What a great time to give back. What an easy way to give back by drinking the coffee that serves America's military and their families. HonorboundCoffee.com. Subscribe today. 2 bags for the price of 1 to get you started. Also, time to remind you, if you're going out to commute right now, especially on the West Coast, turn around, go back, get your Relief Factor. I take it in the first hour, remind you about it in hours 2 and 3, and I do it every day, 5 days a week, 15 times a week. I tell you, why do you want to hurt? You don't have to hurt. Don't stop taking whatever your doctor tells you to take. Don't do that. But, you might, if you're addicted to the over-the-counter stuff, not good for you long term, wouldn't be prudent, not going to do it. Try Nature's supplements that have been known from time immemorial to assist in the support of the temporary relief of minor aches and pains, like Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. Great for your general health, the kind of supplement that makes sense for everybody in every age demo. $19.95 gets you a 3-week starter pack. See how it affects you, see how it makes your life better. ReliefFactor.com. Also reminding you, if you're in the market for a mortgage, if you want to refinance, if you want to buy a house, 888-888-1172 connects you with AndrewandTodd.com. Head over there. Now is the day. I mean, it's a terrible time in the market, but it's a great time for a mortgage. AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian, 888-888-1172. I'll be right back. Last segment of today's Hugh Hewitt Show.
So does Gordon Wood actually come over and us once a
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening today. I want to begin by telling you Clarence Thomas is a worthy subject of admiration, and he makes a great movie. JusticeThomasMovie.com. I believe Michael Beckman, my friend in Houston, when he tells me it's one of the more inspiring movies he and Sherilyn have seen. I believe the reviews. I know Michael Pack, the maker of the film. I talked to him about it. More importantly, I've known the Justice since 1984 when we co-chaired the Combined Federal Campaign when he was the head of the EEOC and I was running OPM. I guess 1986. Running OPM, the Ops Personnel Management, as our general counsel, and we were on a commission together. And even then, the young, dynamic EEOC chairman was just an inspiring person long before I knew his backstory, long before I had read My Grandfather's Son. I Am My Grandfather's Son. It's an amazing memoir. He was on the show with me for a long time talking about it years ago. And now they've made this movie, and I need you to go and see it because it's just inspiring. Created Equal, Clarence Thomas in his own words. You can go and see it at justicethomasmovie.com. Find out where it is showing. President of the United States, Donald Trump, in India, winding down a state visit. They're going to have a state dinner tonight. What a reception he's made. They are one of the reporters said, as Britain was to the United States in the 20th century, will India be to the United States in the 21st? If the answer is yes, that's terrific. That's terrific. Big debate tonight. I will bring you all of the news of how it plays out tomorrow. I believe that Bernie Sanders will effectively parry everything. I think Joe Biden could say anything. One more time, if you're just tuning in, I do not have the clip of Joe Biden thanking everyone and asking for their support in his Senate race in South Carolina, but I do have him imagining a meeting with Deng Xiaoping. Can we play that cut, please? Number 13.
And folks, one of the things I'm proudest of is getting passed, getting moved, getting control of the Paris Climate Accord. I'm the guy that came back after meeting with Deng Xiaoping.
I'm the guy that came back after meeting with Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping was dead for 20 plus years when they signed the Paris Climate Accord. And you say, oh, that's just a gaffe. Look, the idea that he got arrested trying to visit Mandela, that's made up. He gets what race he's running in wrong. Honestly, there are times when you say, Dad, sit down, give me the keys. You're not driving anymore. And that'll come to me, in 20 or 30 years, someone's going to say, hey, you know what, Hugh, you shouldn't be on the radio anymore. When that happens, it happens. It's called aging. But you don't run for president this way. Anyway, Bernie is not that way. Elizabeth Warren is not that way. This is not an ageist thing. Some people play the game. My great-grandfather, A.T. Roll, fire chief of Ashtabula, Ohio, stayed in the game until he was 101 on his own wheels in his own house. And so it's God gives different genes to different people. It's just that Joe Biden's genes for running are long past. He was never very good at running for president to begin with. He was only good at running in Delaware. Time for him to get out of the way. Look, there will also be votes today in the United States Senate, I believe today, on the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. And on the second bill, the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act. They need 60 votes. Call your Democratic senators who are blocking both pro-life bills. The Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act bans nearly all abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy, according to the New York Times. The Born Alive Survivors Protection Act requires doctors to use all means available to save the life of a child born after an abortion. Both are rare, relatively rare things, but it's important to be on record about rarity. It's just important to do that. So go and be pro-life. Call your senator today and ask them to support both of those laws. And then come back tomorrow because, Mike Bloomberg is just the least inspiring guy. Let's play Mike Bloomberg with Al Sharpton yesterday on MSNBC just so you can be ready for the somnambulance of tonight. Cut number 9.
What is the argument you make that why Mike Bloomberg should be trusted by black Americans?
Did something to try to reduce crime, and we did cut the murder rate 50%, so we saved thousands of lives. It got out of control. I made a mistake. I've fixed the mistake. I've apologized for and asked for forgiveness, and I'm doing other things that will help the community. I can't go rewrite history, but I can continue the fight against get guns off the streets, get better education for people, have more economic opportunity. And the biggest thing I can do, I think, is replace Donald Trump and put in a president who has a feeling for people, because the president is the leader. And whether you like it or not.
Okay, here's Joe Biden Let's play Joe Biden closing his campaign rally last night.
And you're the ones that sent Barack Obama the presidency. And I have a simple proposition here. I'm here to ask you for your help. Where I come from, you don't get far unless you ask. My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. Look me over. If you like what you see, help out. If not, vote for the other guy. Give me a look, though, okay?
Oh, goodness gracious. Play it again. Play it again. Running for the Senate.
Ones that sent Barack Obama the presidency. And I have a simple proposition here. I'm here to ask you for your help. Where I come from, you don't get far unless you ask. My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. Look me over. If you like what you see, help out.
Oh, my gosh. For the love of mercy, Joe Biden, get out of the race. Deng Xiaoping and running for the Senate. Trying to get Nelson Mandela and getting arrested. Just Joe Biden. It's the gift that keeps giving to the radio show, but watch tonight. It could be pretty interesting. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. Thanks to each and every one of you for listening. I'll be back tomorrow on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.